Okay, this is chapter 14 of The Night Singer. 14. The forensic technicians had finally gone. Rebecca pressed her forehead against the front doors and closed her eyes. They had taken Joel's computer, the one she had bought secondhand from some guy online. What if there was all kinds of old crap on it and the police thought it was Joel's? Child porn, for example. That was the worst thing she could think of. When she went to Farsjedden to pick up the computer, the man had been wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt that didn't quite cover his belly. Greasy hair and terrible breath. She tried to dredge up his name from the fog of her mind, but it was impossible. She didn't think she had saved any of their messages back and forth. Rebecca slowly raised an arm and pressed her palm to the door. It felt like the link between her body and the outside world was coming loose, and she wanted to fix it. Didn't want to lose herself the way she had lost Joel. The technicians had also taken his sketchbooks, including the one he had refused to let her look inside. He had promised to show her later. Would she ever get to see it now? What else had they taken? Rebecca didn't know. The technicians wouldn't answer any of her questions. At first, they hadn't wanted to leave her alone, kept asking whether there was anyone they could call. In the end, she had forced them to go, told them her husband was on his way, that she had talked to him, though that was a lie. Rebecca let go of the door and moved over to the sofa, hugging one of the zebra print cushions to her body. She had such an ache in her chest that she didn't know what to do. She screamed and threw the cushion, only just missing the vase on the sideboard. She reached for another. She really should call Petrie, her mother too, but that would make it all so final. Somewhere deep down, she was still hoping it was all just a big mistake, that Joel would come striding through the door at any moment and ask why she was so upset. Tears began rolling down her cheeks again. She was back in the strange meeting with Hannah. It had been such a shock to open the door and see her standing outside. She really had missed Hannah over the years and had come close to getting in touch several times, but for various reasons it had never happened. Partly because of Axel and Joel, because she would have had to explain, as though it still mattered that she had kept quiet about it 16 years ago. Rebecca also felt ashamed. How could she have sat there chattering with Hannah about her brother like nothing had happened just after learning that Joel was dead? She should have put a stop to it sooner. Why did she have so few friends? She had plenty of acquaintances, but barely anyone she spoke with, not about anything that mattered anyway. Her family and her small business took up all of her time. Ulrika, her neighbor, was probably the closest thing to a friend she had, and she had slept with her husband. Goddamn Gabriel. Goddamn everything. It was so damn pathetic of her to have folded by a pair of bright blue eyes and some defined chest muscles. Beautiful yet utterly empty words. Perhaps she should call Ulrika after all. Ask her for help getting Petrie back home. Her phone began to buzz on the coffee table, making Rebecca jump. She didn't have the energy to answer, but she reached for the phone anyway to see who it was. Molly's school. Shit, had something happened to her too? Hello? She answered, her voice trembling. I just found Molly waiting on the steps. Has something... Rebecca lowered the phone from her ear and checked the time. She should have picked Molly up over half an hour ago. She pressed a hand to her chest in an attempt to still the panic. Sorry, she mumbled down the line. I'm coming now. Somehow Rebecca managed to make her way over to the school. Molly was sitting on the steps with Isaac, the teacher who had called. The after-school club was still open, and there was some kind of game going on in the yard, but Molly knew when she was supposed to be picked up, and she didn't like it when things didn't go according to plan. Like Joel, she had been more anxious than usual lately. It was obvious she had been crying. I'm so sorry, sweetie. That was as far as she got. She couldn't do it. Not here. Isaac placed a hand on her arm and studied her, but she shook her head at the question in his eyes. If she said a single word about Joel, she wouldn't be able to make it home. They left the schoolyard with Isaac's eyes still on them. The journey home suddenly felt like kilometers, and she wanted to call Petrie and ask him to come and pick them up, but her phone was still on the coffee table. Are you tired? Asked Molly. Being tired was the excuse Rebecca always gave whenever she had done something she was ashamed of. Shouting at Molly, for example, or not having the energy to play with her. She nodded. I was asleep. That's why I didn't realize the time. In the middle of the day? I know. It's crazy, isn't it? but not as crazy as the fact that Joel had been found dead, she thought, that the police thought someone had killed him. Rebecca bit her lip to fight back the tears, but not even the taste of blood was enough. She wanted to get home, to close the door behind her, crawl into bed, and pull the covers over her head, only waking up when she could handle everyday life again. "What's wrong, Mommy?" "I'm feeling a bit sad, too." "Me too," said Molly. "Why?" "I don't know." Rebecca squeezed her daughter's hand. "That's just the way it is sometimes." They were halfway home now, and somehow they had to make it. Fortunately, the only other person they bumped into was Gerd, whose glaucoma meant she couldn't see Rebecca's bloodshot eyes. She nodded in greeting. She knew she should say something. They hadn't spoken since her garage burned down, but she didn't trust her voice. Some people claimed Gerd had accidentally started the fire herself, but most seemed to think that someone else was responsible. Rebecca herself was convinced it was the lightning. She had been awake when it happened, counting the seconds between the flashes of light and claps of thunder. The relief Rebecca felt as she reached the house and closed the door behind her made her sway. She put Molly on the sofa with the tablet and some headphones. Molly grinned surprised. She often spent the time between getting home and dinner watching TV, but she was rarely given the tablet this easily. An optician had once mentioned that the light from the screen was damaging. Rebecca picked up her phone from the coffee table and took it into the kitchen, where she stood cradling it for a few minutes before finally managing to dial Petrie's number. She began crying the minute she heard his voice. "What's wrong, honey?" "Come home," she managed to stutter. "Why? What's going on?" "Joel is dead."